Hi and welcome to this week's Property Matters, the show that brings global trends to an Irish audience to help shape your knowledge of the industry. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or by email at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your hosts today are myself, Brian Fox, and Carol Town. Carol.
Hello, good evening. So a few of the quick news stories, or some of the big news stories from the week. First of all, only a fraction of landlords who have rented out properties on Airbnb and other home sharing websites have registered them, according to the government's new short-term letting rules, according to the Irish Times this week. So figures obtained from local authorities in rent pressure zones in Dublin, Cork, Galway and Limerick, where the housing crisis is at its worst, show that very few people have actually registered their properties despite the regulations coming into effect on July 1st. So, for example, Dublin City Council received only 110 registrations, in stark contrast with the 6,228 active rentals on Airbnb in Dublin. Galway City Council received 8 registrations, Limerick City Council received just 2 and Cork County Council just 2 also.
Okay, well, housing charities bid for €1 billion of AIB's bad loans in what is seen as a boost for struggling families. Construction costs are forecast to increase by a whopping 6.3% this year, fuelled by new green energy standards, according to the Irish Independent. And Housing Minister Eoghan Murphy is considering a use it or lose it rule to get developers whose sites have planning permission to get building faster. And finally, Hammerson plans further residential development at Dundrum.
Okay, and then in some breaking news, which is relevant to our show this evening, Bartra's co-living development in Dunleary has been given the green light by An Bord Pleanála. Now, this is very timely for us because, of course, tonight's show is a co-living special, and we're delighted to be joined in studio by RooMigo founder and co-living expert, Ed Burke. And just before we move on to that, we actually reached out to Bartra earlier and just to get their reaction to the application. And Mike Flannery, CEO, said this is a pragmatic decision based on Ireland's need to embrace new tenure types. The board recognises that there's a place for co-living within the Irish housing market, and they look forward to delivering this new and innovative form of accommodation. And Mike Flannery actually went on to say that Ireland needs new models of housing to cater for changing demographics, living habits and employment patterns. Co-living is one such response to these changes. It is a form of accommodation targeted specifically at single professionals who do not want a single room apartment, and it's worked well in other cities including London, New York and Vienna. Bartra Capital will proceed with the development and implement all conditions outlined by An Bord Pleanála. So, Brian, co-living has been causing quite a headache for our housing minister, and I know you spoke to him about it recently.
Well, it has, and it's interesting because this situation has been going on for some time, and for a lot of us that do not know what co-living is all about, there was a lot of confusion about it as far as I was concerned anyway. The confusion then was further compounded by the minister's statements on it and the press narrative after that. So really, and I put it back to you, Carol, what's your assessment of the planning permission and the fact that it's going ahead and the confusion in relation to the whole issue of co-living?
Well, look, I'm absolutely in favour of co-living, and as long as it is affordable for the demographic that it's targeted at. I think it's a positive development that Bartra got the planning application. I think it's a missing rung on the property ladder that people need. It's fulfilling a specific requirement. It's absolutely not for everybody, and that's fine. It's not designed to be for everybody, but I think it is designed for a demographic that it will suit. And of course, we're joined in studio by Ed. So Ed, how did you receive the application, the news of that application being successful?
You actually kindly forwarded it on to me, so it was interesting to see it. And I think co-living is going to be a very important part of the fabric of living in Dublin for the next decade and probably beyond that. What's very important is that the co-living delivered by the various operators is affordable for the particular target market that they're targeting.
Mm-hmm. And I that's been one of the problems, but one of the other problems is that the messaging was just so wrong.
That's what I want to come to.
Yeah, and you actually took up that issue with the Minister.
Before we played the clip, I just wanted to sort of ascertain from you before we do it. There is controversy over the rentals as well, over the cost of the rooms. Is that justified, do you think?
Well, at the moment, we've nothing to compare it to. That's the problem. So I think that when people look at the offering, look at the price, and then compare it to what that particular price would buy in the market, yes, it does look like it's a small room and shared facilities, but they're not factoring in the short-term use. This is more of a licence than a tenancy. They're not factoring in the sense of community. And I think that's something that, Ed, I know you feel very strongly about with RooMigo. In fact, it was probably one of the driving forces behind RooMigo, and do you think that's maybe what some of us aren't getting, what the rest of us aren't getting?
Maybe we need to explain what exactly co-living is. Co-living is just another word for shared living. So there are over 120,000 people in Dublin living in shared living accommodation, and that means living in flat shares or house shares. So it's been done already. So what the co-living we're reading about in the media is, that's really flat shares are the co-living that's going to come to Ireland, being managed by a company. So it's like having maybe 50 different flat shares within a building.
But to be fair, it's purpose built, and I think that's the distinction, because you could stay over in our spare room. You're not going to have the same experience as if you go to a hotel, because hotel is designed for guests. So I think the fact that it's purpose built is a very important distinction.
Well, I think there are a number of different co-living models. There's one such co-living model which is almost like staying in a hotel, where you get your room. It might be a suite. You get services on top of that, like you might get your bedclothes changed. You pay an all-inclusive rent, and there might be a concierge service, and they may even have a restaurant in the building.
It's not even called rent, though, is it?
It's I don't,
a licence fee.
Yeah, I think I gave a very good background to it there, because that's the sort of point I took up from the minister. So I think we might as well just play the piece now and see how you react to it and Carol react to it as well. Just to get to local issues, there's been a huge backlash about statements you made relating to the proposed development of co-living rooms on O'Blan Avenue in Dún Laoghaire. Were you surprised by it?
Well, I didn't make a statement about any individual planning application because I can't. As the Minister for Planning, I can't speak to any individual planning application as it goes through the process. And I was speaking at a conference of planners and architects who have welcomed these guidelines because co-living in other cities does work. It's about 7 or 8 rooms en suite, which I didn't have my first flat, where you've got a kitchen, but you've also got potentially
communal
a gym.
living, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, in some of these places they've got a shared gym. They've got movie rooms. They've got games rooms, and this all comes into the price of the rent. And it's not for everyone. It's certainly not for families. It's not for homeless people. But I see a sector, particularly people coming to work here for maybe 6 months, 12 months, maybe longer, who don't have 3 or 4 friends they can move into a house with, who maybe don't want to sign a 12-month lease, maybe don't want to go through the hassle of getting utility bills, setting up Sky Sports, whatever they might be into. I might also like the social aspect of this. So it's there for a very small percentage of the market, but everything we do in housing takes pressure off another part of the market. So, I think it's something that we should have. And now we're starting to see interest. But if you look at the tens of thousands of homes that are going to be built over the next 12 months, I was saying this last night on TV, like less than 1% will probably be for co-living. So, when I was talking about this being something that might be exciting to certain people, I think for certain people, particularly those coming into the country for a particular period of time, it will be something that they would go for over the traditional rental model.
Of course, I suppose the criticism there, Owen, is the fact that they are not in a particular plight as such, whereas homeless people are.
No, exactly. But if we get them out of the traditional rental sector, then we free up rental beds for people who are in crisis.
The significance of that is it's only 1%.
Yeah, but we've got to do a bit of everything. Like we've got to look at short-term letting, which we've done now. We've effectively regulated the use of a second property for short-term letting in places like Dublin, Cork and Galway and other areas. And that might mean, in Dublin that over the next 12 months only, and I say only, 1,000 homes come back into the long-term rental market. And that would be less than 1%. That's 1,000 families who didn't have somewhere to rent, now having somewhere to rent. That's not a small thing.
Just go back to the co-living point. I did some research on this, and apparently it's very popular in the US, particularly in New York. So again, I get back to the question. Did you not? I know you were speaking at a conference and so forth. Messaging seems to have gone wrong somewhere in relation to this.
Well, I'll tell you what happened, and I accept responsibility for this myself in a way. I was speaking at a planning conference, speaking to planners about planning guidelines and talking about one aspect of the reforms that we've made. But as I was making those remarks, people in public were debating a particular planning application. that people don't like. And my remarks about the concept were then linked publicly by politicians to this specific planning application. So all of a sudden, I was excited by the idea that 40 people are going to share a kitchen. I'm not excited by that. I don't think anyone would really be excited by that. That's not the concept that I have in the planning guidelines. So that happened then.
So it's a media narrative that went wrong?
No, I just think it was unfortunate timing. Should I have foreseen that people were going to link my remarks on a concept to an individual planning application? Perhaps. I don't know. But I didn't say that. But what was very frustrating for me was then over the next 2 or 3 days, people were saying that I had said this when I hadn't. And sometimes that old adage in politics, when you're explaining, you're losing. But I didn't want to lose the concept either because I know it's going to help.
Yeah. Do you think on board Pleanála will allow the scheme in Dún Laoghaire at this point?
I can't speak about that, Brian, about what I think they will or won't do. What I will say is...
Would you encourage, though, that type of co-living around Dublin? Because there are some applications.
Yeah, what I would say is that the guidelines so far have been enforced by An Bord Pleanála as I would have seen it, in that they have rejected already a planning application for co-living that wasn't in line with the guidelines. So as we know it today, the guidelines are robust, but we will keep them under review.
That was Minister Eoghan Murphy there, Minister for Housing Eoghan Murphy, in an interview I did on another programme I have here at the station. A fairly comprehensive reaction to co-living, Ed, I think you'd agree. He made many, many points on it. The fact, for me, the fact that glitch, shall we say, he made at a planning conference seemed to throw the whole idea of co-living into a spin.
Which glitch was this?
Well, in fact, what he had said at the conference was that it would be cool, I think. What was the word, the expression?
He said it'd be like a trendy boutique hotel.
Trendy boutique hotel, exactly, yeah.
But it totally depends on a model. So there are a number of different co-living models. So, for example, in the US, there's a company called Common, and there's another company called Quarters in Berlin. And in that particular model, the co-living units are actually apartments for 2 to 5 people. So you have, I think with Quarters in Berlin, all their rooms and their apartments are within normal residential guidelines for the size of rooms. What they're actually doing is they're taking a little bit of space from the living area within the apartment. So you still have a kitchen and a living area, and you might have 2 to 5 rooms, but the actual living space in the apartment is a bit smaller, and they're adding more space then to the shared communal areas within the building. So you actually have apartments. The Common in the United States is quite similar as well. Node Living also has their buildings split into apartments. So it really depends on the model. I think the model the minister might be talking about is a model where you've got suites and the buildings aren't split into apartments, so it just depends on the model. So some of the models out there, you would have a fabulous suite with your own kitchen, and it's really high spec. You've got services, you've got facilities on top of it. You may even have a restaurant in the building, and you might describe that as a form of boutique hotel. So I wouldn't entirely disagree, but it depends on the model. That would be a real high-end model where you're targeting very high earning professionals, maybe making 60, 70, 80,000 euro a year. But for companies maybe like Quarters in Berlin, where the rent starts at 600 euro a month, and you're actually in a flat share from 2 to 5 people, that is aimed at a more affordable market.
So
okay, and sorry, can I just clarify there in relation to the Berlin market? What's the average rent in Berlin at the moment? Say if you were to rent a 2-bed apartment.
So I think more in terms of rooms, because RooMigo is all about rooms. But Quarters is starting at about 600 euro, and I think they're thereabouts, say 10% more expensive than a room. So you're paying a little bit more to get the community and the shared facilities.
But not much more.
But not much more. So I don't exactly know what the average rent in Berlin is, but I think it's about 500, 550. It's significantly lower than Dublin anyway.
Okay.
Do you think he was looking? The minister was looking at too much marketing bump, and this thing came to his mind when he was.
Look, I think I feel like I say this so often on the show, but that's the problem when politics gets involved. You know, everything sounds different in a soundbite, and I have certainly been critical of the minister at various times in the past, but actually I think he's been completely taken out of context in his commentary about this, and the sound bites have proven popular, particularly against the backdrop of the severe and really chronic housing crisis and growing homelessness that we're seeing at the moment. So I think that it's been very politically advantageous for people to take the minister out of context in this particular scenario. But I think that's been done really unfairly and actually in a way that really distorts the commentary. And by the way, you know, when the news of Bartra's development broke earlier today, I shared it across our social media platforms, and quite frankly, the backlash has been pretty vicious already. It has, which means that actually this rhetoric is working. You know, people who don't understand the model, as Ed rightly points out, people who don't understand the model are commenting on it and calling it a disgrace, not actually understanding that it's an offering. And
there are a number of different types of co-living models. It's like a hotel. Some hotels are 1 star, some are 5, some are 3. Like any business in the world, there are a number of different models. So co-living shouldn't be defined by one particular offering. And the other thing to note as well is co-living is a new emerging business. So nobody really knows what is going to work. It remains to be seen what is the ideal model. So we'll probably see several different offerings come into the Irish market, and we'll see which works over the long term. The main thing is that it has to be affordable for the particular particular member that they're targeting. It has to be convenient, and it has to have community, because the underlying point is about community. So the minister is absolutely right. People moving to Ireland may not have friends, and co-living is good for them. But I would add as well that if you don't have friends and you're looking for housemates, you can already do that on RooMigo, as has thousands of people been doing for the last year, or hundreds every week. But so with RooMigo, we're focusing on actually bringing communities together, creating little clusters so people can have friends, and then they might move into a house share, or they might move into one of the co-living operators that is opening in Dublin.
Okay, well, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here, because I think one of the things that's gone wrong with the introduction to co-living to Ireland is that I accept there are a range of models, but we've only seen the premium in Ireland. And unfortunately, there's maybe an expectation there that has set the bar. So we're saying, actually, this is co-living, this is what we define it as, and this is what we price it as. And we already know that there is only premium co-living in Ireland. We don't have co-living that starts at $600 a month, and there's none of that on the horizon. If
and
you look
is there
at
a
the
market for that, do you think, Carol?
I absolutely think there's a market, because we already took away the studio apartment, so we took away the bottom rung of the ladder. And as a parent who has a 20-year-old living at home, I would say that actually we have a whole generation who needs that bottom rung of the ladder.
Well, if there's 120,000 people or thereabouts living in house and flat shares, there's absolutely a market for it. But what's actually happened is the people that can afford, say, €500 rent a month to €600 rent a month, if you're on a salary of about 27k, are being forced to live in shared rooms and live outside the city. And unfortunately, I don't see within the next decade or two accommodation, a co-living in Ireland being offered at €600, because I can't afford to build it at that rate.
You've answered my question. Okay, I was going to say, is it viable, do you think, for property developers to buy real estate in this town? I'm not a real estate developer, but I really don't think so. But what might be viable is for co-living operators to come in and offer something in the range from maybe €900 to €1,000, maybe €800 to €1,000, depending on the location. So €800 would be a little bit, say $850 would be a little bit higher than the average rent, and that may be viable.
Do you think the offering makes up for that? So, for example, for people whose first introduction to accommodation outside of their home is student accommodation, we can see now the student accommodation, there's very little available, particularly in the purpose-built student accommodation blocks, for under €1,000 a month. So this standard offering seems to start at about €250 per week. Again, I worry that we've essentially set the bar, and we've said this is what contemporary student accommodation purpose-built looks like, and this is how much it costs, and we set the bar at about €1,000 a month, and I don't see how that's going to come down.
But you have to look at what people will pay, because I can see on RooMigo what people are paying every day of the week. So if you're willing to pay over €1,000, you tend to be a high earning professional and your standards are incredibly high. So for €1,100, you can get a room and a house share in Grand Canal Dock, in Ranelagh or Rathmines, and these are the areas they all want to live. They're the most popular areas amongst the high earning tech professional. So if the co-living is at around that mark, it's going to have to be a really high quality offering. Then people that are, say, willing to pay, say, $750 to $800 a month, they will kind of be a little bit more open-minded in terms of the location of where they're going to live.
Okay. No, look, I
And tell me, if one is to pay, as you were saying, $900 in rent, is there a lease involved then in that? Because he was more or less suggesting that there's no lease involved with co-living.
But it depends on the co-living operator. For example, Quarters in Berlin are one of the biggest in the world. All of theirs are actually done on leases, so it could be an 18-month lease. It totally depends.
Do you know what the minimum leases are there?
I don't know what the minimum leases are, but I think it's like renting standard residential accommodation, but I'm not sure what the minimum is.
But does that mean you're into 6-month leases or 12-month leases? Because again, doesn't that defeat the purpose of paying a premium for that kind of flexibility?
Well, I think their offering would be, I assume that they would argue is actually a much more affordable, cheaper offering than their competitors. And in that particular situation, you're just paying a little bit more than you might be paying in a typical house share, but you do get the managed facilities. So there's a lot more on top of that. You're getting the community, assuming they do their job and they help create the community and so forth.
Okay, Ed, I feel like you're going to be carrying the weight of co-living in Ireland on your shoulders, but I'm delighted that you're with us for the whole show. So we need to take a quick break now, and when we come back, we might just talk about the other more important aspects in terms of community. So coming up after the break, we'll continue that conversation.
Everything's fine on 93.9 Dublin South FM.
And you're very welcome back here to Property Matters here on Dublin South FM with myself, Brian Fox, and Carol Tallon. Just a reminder, you can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Carol.
Okay, so earlier today I caught up with Anil Khera, CEO of Node, and Node are the co-living providers in Fitzwilliam Square, the one operating in Ireland, maybe the one that most people would be familiar with. Now, just apologies in advance, we did have some technical difficulties with Anil, so this recording is cut slightly short, but we'll have a listen to what he had to say. Now, next we're delighted to be joined on the line by Anil Khera, founder and CEO of Node. Anil, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
So, Anil, you were obviously involved in co-living back almost 18 months ago here in Ireland, when really we didn't know what co-living was all about. So you might just give us a little bit of background about Node.
Sure. Node is a global co-living company that was founded in 2016. And our idea was that we saw that there was a need for better living standards in cities, especially for urban creatives, professionals, and entrepreneurs. And we saw Dublin as a city that obviously was budding with those types of people, and also a city that had a huge housing crisis. And so we found an opportunity to launch Node in Dublin in Fitzwilliam Square about 18 months ago. And it's been just a fantastic journey, and we'd like to do more in Ireland.
Very good. And how many tenants do you have? Or actually, do you even call people tenants? What's the correct terminology now for co-living? Are they members?
Well, different people use different names. Of course, some people say tenants, some people say members, which is an interesting one. We say residents, because at the end of the day, we are creating homes for people. And homes really implies being a resident. And a bit more of an ownership and involvement idea resonates much more with being a resident than a tenant, which sort of kind of pits you as a second-class citizen, there. Whereas, our residents are doing interesting things in the world and quite engaged, want to get involved in the communities. They don't, and I think there's just negative connotations of sometimes using the word tenants.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And actually, I think in Ireland we have a particular history around the word as well. So historically it hasn't been a word that has positive connotations. So you're absolutely right. What are tenants really looking for when they're moving to new urban cities?
Well, there's three things, really the three C's. One is cost, one is convenience, and the other is community. And so breaking that in, when we think about cost, they're looking for an affordable solution. Housing cities are very expensive to live in. And so finding a place to live that's cost-effective and works on people's budget is super important. The second thing is, when you just think about the haggles of coming to a city, even if you're from the same country or just coming in from the suburbs into the city, the amount of work that you might have to do that, finding a place to live, trusting agent postings, making sure a unit is nice, clean, safe, finding a roommate potentially, in some cases furniture or making sure it's up to standard, getting to know your neighbor, all of those things are massive. And so if we can take a convenient offer that handles all of that by facilitating that, that's an important thing to happen. And having a community where you know people, like I said, know people in their building, know people in the area. So those three things of affordability through a cost solution, having a place you can connect in community, and these are really the important things that people are looking for.
Okay, and I think community ties very well into the changing needs of the current generation and demographic that's actually looking at housing. So I can see how that would work, and it's something that, we have Ed Burke in studio from RooMigo to talk to us about the massive importance of community. And again, convenience, that's something that we know is a symptom of our on-demand life. But cost is one of the criticisms that co-living has come under in Ireland, and I think it's because the concept itself is quite broadly misunderstood. So you might just address that if you could.
Well, sure. Look, I think any new housing stock that is created is going to be slightly more expensive in urban cities than existing stock because you're getting brand new kit.
Okay, and again, apologies for the technical difficulties we had on the line there with Anil, founder of Node. And in fact, it was unfortunate that the line cut off there because Anil had so many more interesting things to say about community and how that's created. So we're definitely going to pick that up with him another time. But actually, we might just, Ed, because of course we have Ed Burke, founder of RooMigo, in studio with us. Ed, we might just get you to step in there and talk to us about community, because I know that seems to be the magic sauce, the X factor, maybe what many of the media commentators are missing about the conversation with co-living.
Yeah, I agree. I think community is incredibly important. So I always give the example of when I moved to Singapore, I knew nobody. So do you want to live in a new city, even if you're a millionaire, in an apartment where you know nobody, you're 27 and you're going to be lonely, or do you want to live with a community of friends and a home? So that's what co-living is all about. It's about creating a community and a home. And community has become incredibly important over the last decade or so. We've got all sorts of communities, online communities, offline communities. So this is just creating a community and a home. So what RooMigo does is it helps bring together like-minded people. You could move to Dublin, you don't know anybody. So how do you find other friends to live with? So Maya, who will be speaking in a few minutes, moved to Ireland from France to work for Indeed.com. She's 28, professional tech worker. But when she moved here, she didn't know anybody, nor could she afford a house on her own, because if she was to rent a house, how many thousands is that going to cost per month? So she used RooMigo then to find two other housemates that they were able to team up together. They had a little group or a little co-living community, and then they were able to go off and rent the house together. So that's why I came up with RooMigo, because I experienced the problem when I moved to Singapore. And if you don't know anybody and you're in a new city, it can be actually an incredibly lonely experience. Mm-hmm. And I think people crave community, and I think it's here to stay, and it's here for the long term. But I would say that it can extend far beyond the 20 to say 35 demographic that co-living is primarily targeting now. I think someday elderly people will do it. So even on, say, RooMigo, 70% of our members are, say, between, I think, 23 to 35, but there are some members in their 60s. And I think in the future we'll see co-living companies, operators providing a solution that targets a much broader demographic, because people like to live with companions, know their neighbours, and it brings that sense of community to city living, because city living can be important. I grew up in the country and I knew my neighbours when I was growing up, but now what's happening is people are moving to cities and they don't know who's living next door, they don't know who's living above or below them, they go to work, they don't know who's on the tube if it's in London, and it can be a very miserable experience. So co-living actually, or shared living, I think is a word people might be more familiar with, just brings that community to the home.
But I think, is it fair to say that there might be a generational breakdown here, as in, and I accept what you're saying there, that the need spans all age demographics, and that might be very well the case. But I think 20 years ago, if we were lucky, even 10 years ago, sharing accommodation with strangers was essentially something you did because financially you needed to do it, and as soon as you could afford not to do it, the majority of people chose not to do it.
But I think people do like or want, and we're talking now of the generation you're talking about, their own space and their own front door and back door and green at the back and so forth as well.
Yeah, so I wonder, is that why the conversation is getting a little bit mixed up and the message is going so badly wrong and going so badly off message? Is it because people who aren't familiar with this new era of a new generation, these new models of co-living, that they're still looking at things that should be cost benefits?
Let me ask you one question then, and I could keep you out of this for one moment, and Carol perhaps should be kept out of this as well. Who knew about co-living up to, well, I didn't know about it up to this year myself.
Yeah, but if we called it shared living, then we all did it.
I mean, my point being that it's been an interesting experience as I came on board on this programme as well, so forth as well, and the ministers as well, in this whole aspect of co-living, because from the research I saw anyway, co-living, and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't come to the States or to New York anyway, specifically until 2010, 2012, would that be correct?
I think there were some offerings before that, but it's really only started taking off in the last few years.
Yeah. So my point being that, something's got to be done here. I'm not going to use the word educate, that sounds a bit patronising, but to inform people of how there is another type of living.
Well, I think that in Ireland, we're just not very familiar with the whole concept of choice when it comes to housing, because we very much, we grew up in our family homes. Straight after that, we went into student accommodation, which for the majority of us was pretty dodgy and pretty dismal. And as soon as you could afford something better, you got something better. And in your first job, that's when you went into either an apartment share or a house share. And as soon as you could afford it, you might have rented something yourself until you saved up the deposit. Those were, again, the days where you could rent and save for a deposit in order to get your first mortgage. Yeah. We didn't have housing options.
But I would still say at the same point, if I might just use Michael O'Leary's, who's CEO of Ryanair, here's all adage is, when they were talking about the bad treatment he meted out to customers, people vote with their feet, and until people can see different offers and different ways of doing things, their behaviour is not going to change. So my point is that up to now, and over the past 3 months, we've had this very negative narrative on co-living that I would think that people will be reluctant to look at it now at this point.
But again, that's the same way we might have said that people would be reluctant to fly with Ryanair, and the reality is that we all do it when we need to get from A to B, because actually not only are they the lowest cost, but they also, for the majority of destinations, they have the greatest flight choice and lots of other great options.
Maybe if I can jump
in
here.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine a situation, you moved to Dublin. Say I moved to Dublin from Tipperary, where I'm from, and imagine I knew nobody, and I was 25, and if I could find a co-living building with say 100 residents in it, and it is in Rathmines or Ranelagh or Drumcondra, wherever, in a nice central location, and it had apartments where you were sharing with 2 to 5 people, which 120,000 people already do it, nothing new. But in addition to that, if the co-living operator is able to sell to me the fact or prove that they have a community of people. So I know that if I'm moving into my 2 to 5 bedroom apartment, I'm going to be living with other like-minded people, say in the 20s to early 30s. They're going to have similar interests and passions to me. That's a good thing. But not only that, within the building, there's going to be 20 other apartments with 2 to 5 people in each apartment. And they're all going to be, cool young people working in maybe tech or whatever I'm working in, professional services or whatever. It's going to be an international mix, maybe some Irish and international mix. So you're going to get a great experience of different cultures. And in addition to that, you've got great shared communal areas where people hang out, maybe a roof garden. Am I going to move in? Absolutely, I'll move in 110% because I'm already going to live in a house share. And if the co-living company gets it right, they're actually doing a house share better. So what will I pay to move in? Well, I'm not going to pay less than a house share, obviously. So I'll probably pay a little bit more than a house share. But it depends on how much more I pay will depend on the community that they offer, the convenience that they're offering. I mean, if it's in a bad location, I'm not going to pay more. But if it's in a good location, that could nudge it a bit as well, and also maybe they've got other facilities and perks involved on top of it, which might add value. So, for example, some co-living companies, they'll change your bed clothes, etc., etc. Some people might want that, but maybe I don't want that, and if I don't want that,
you'll go for a different offering. But okay, and then that's based on the assumption that we have a range of offerings in the market, and that's just not the case in Ireland. So I think this
do you think is it going to take off?
Do I think it will take off? Oh, I absolutely do, because actually I do think that this will become a very viable form of delivering units for developers.
Viable and attractive.
Yeah, I think for construction companies, I mean, we already saw there in the early stages of recovery that a student accommodation was the fastest growing sector, and there was a very clear reason for that. It wasn't just demand, because we demand across all sectors. It was that it was a very affordable type of construction to deliver. But I think the most important thing is not do I think it'll take off? What we want to see is a greater range of options. So we need, yes, absolutely, bring in the premium offering, and if the market's going to pay for it, it'll pay for it. But we need to bring in the wider range. And I think it's so important what the Minister said in his interview with you earlier, Brian, that if 1,000 people opt to go into one of these co-living spaces, that's 1,000 people that are moving out of other room shares or flat shares or traditional rented apartments. And I feel like I say this a lot on the show, but the reality is every new bed and every new home and every new unit that's delivered to the market must be seen as part of the solution. Even if it brings its own problems, we'll have to deal with those other problems. But the reality is, at a time for chronic housing shortage, every new bed and every new home delivered into the market is part of the solution. And look, I know that this is something we're going to come back to, because again we have the whole show to talk about co-living, and I'm delighted in the third part of our show today we're actually going to bring in somebody who was recently relocated to Dublin and actually hear about the experience on the ground and maybe why decisions were made. So coming up after the break, we'll continue this conversation. Thank you.
Broadcasting to South Dublin on 93.9. This is Dublin South FM.
And the programme is Property Matters with myself, Brian Fox, and Carol Tallon. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Now, we have a new panellist in the studio at this moment in time, talking about co-living. She's from France. Her name is Maya, and you're going to tell me your last name, Maya.
Chawaf,
okay. You're from Paris?
Born and raised.
Originally from Paris, and you've been here since in Dublin?
Late October 2018.
So tell us of your experience in Dublin from the point of view of looking for accommodation.
This was one of my biggest concerns. For a little background story, I never left the neighborhood I had always known.
Oh, really?
So this was a big shock. When I decided to be independent and live on my own, I moved 6 floors away from my parents' place.
In Paris, yeah.
Same building.
That's fine, yeah. That's close to your parents too as well. It's nice.
First step into independency.
Very good.
And then one day I just announced that I've been contacted by a company based in Dublin that I feel that it's Indeed, actually. for a sales role. I don't know. It was the dream opportunity regarding my career and the step I wanted to take next.
So it was the right job for you,
So
but in a different city. Did you know about Dublin?
it was. I'm sorry, but I didn't
know anything.
It was not on my next year's to-do list for
I don't know here so far.
And so I decided that within 12 hours, it took me 12 hours to answer the LinkedIn email. I replied. I said I will go into the process, and then I told my parents, I think everything's going to be fast. Prepare. If everything goes according to plan and I get the job, I feel that within October I would have flown away.
So you had to prepare your parents for that.
Well, they're first little bird.
To fly the nest, I like it.
I left the nest but stayed close and then told everyone, guys, you know what? I'm moving again, for real, abroad, out of nowhere. And I think
okay, so just to try and get one thing from you, you actually speak good English, but at the time where you had English leaving France, did you?
This was my biggest asset, maybe my level in English. In France, we're bad at languages, and fun story is that I'm the first of 3 children. And my mom used to cover the books, with plastic at the beginning of every school year. And when I started to learn English, entering middle school, she went through the book. She went through to the corridor, ran at my dad and said, "We have to invest a lot of money. I think there's 1 English word per page in that book. This is not going to happen. She will not speak like the French do." It turned out that I do actually. I sound French, but I'm fluent. So they put me at the British Council, forced me to do that for 6 years. But I thank them for that. So I had that.
So you had a reasonable good grasp of English before
I was
that.
not scared about that.
Yeah,
excellent. So once I set up my mind and decided that I will do anything it takes to get the job, handle the professional side, I had to organize anything personal. I'm a very passionate, sensitive, sometimes fragile. So I was wondering if I could make it in this new life. So my biggest concern was, okay, first things first. I have the job, the salary, anything. Where am I going to live? So first thing to settle. I went online, read a lot, and thought it was going to be a nightmare because finding an accommodation in Dublin looks terrible.
It's terrible if you're based in Dublin, so I'd imagine it's doubly difficult if you're outside the country.
I'm from Paris, inside Paris. I was born and raised close to the Eiffel Tower. Everything has to be central. So it was not an option for me to spend more than to live too far from the city center. Paris is a big capital. I knew I was living for a smallest town, not a town, it's a capital still, but a smallest city, and I wanted to be close to the center. I needed that feel life.
Of course, the other thing here is that Irish people don't particularly live in Dublin city centre here.
I have met so few Irish people actually. No.
Anyway,
exaggerating.
So you did your research.
I did my research online. Got scared a lot. And realized it was going to be a lot of my salary going into accommodation. I thought Paris was expensive. I discovered that here it's even worse.
And when the week you came over to start your job, did you give yourself time before, or did you stay in Airbnb, or what did you do for the first couple of weeks?
I'm the luckiest person ever because once I decide something is going to happen that way, the stars align by themselves. No.
Go on. We need to speak to. We need to interview somebody else now.
No. Because I got very lucky on this process, and I was very scared, and I had a lot going on in my mind, but I needed a place to stay. I left my previous work a month before. I negotiated to leave a month before my arrival in Dublin, so I could take the time, step by step, to set up, to organize my thing, and leave a few days before getting to work, do the tourist. Had everything planned.
Yeah.
My recruiter, who followed my process, told me that good news. They are going to pay for an apartment.
Oh, very nice.
On Leeson Street.
Oh,
totally furnished, very luxury. I was
Was
crying
that
the whole way on the plane arriving to Dublin. I saw
Yeah.
the apartment, opened the door. I was like, okay.
Was it good?
I'm good. It was amazing.
no.
And did you have that apartment to yourself?
I was this apartment was available for a full month.
Great. So you had a month to really get settled with the city and start to look at housing options.
Exactly. The company
I
told
hope
me.
I hope other employers listening in tonight actually pay attention to that if they're
Well, that's a
relocating
corporate
staff.
yeah.
So we get paid an apartment for 1 month. We have a huge relocation package. So now everything was made to make the
Make
the
it
change
as easy as
as
possible.
easy,
for you.
as
Yeah,
smooth as
yeah.
possible. So I settled my mind and told me, okay, I have 1 month to find. I will start looking once I'm there, because there's no rush and no need. Nobody's going to. I can't book a place right now. And because you find accommodation, things
Yes.
happen
I
in
can
2 days
I
here.
can see a big shock wave coming here now at any moment.
And had you intended to live alone, or did you know that you'd likely be sharing with people?
Well, my first had been co-living and sharing the same room for 25 years with my sister. So I said, I need my space.
Yes.
So my first natural choice was to find a studio or something
Okay.
on my own. A little tour on daft.ie. Putting
Sure.
my budget, I calculated I would be able to pay for rent. Discouraged me very quickly.
Yeah.
So came the next option, which I wasn't really against at all, but I was totally a stranger towards house sharing and stuff, living with foreigners. You have concerns. You have you ask yourself, am I fit for this? Are they going to support me? I talk a lot. I'm full of energy. When they get home and they're tired, I'm just going to ruin what energies they have
vibe.
left. Am I going to live okay with them? What if they steal my food? Anything. I started wondering about anything, and told me again, I have time.
So when did you discover RooMigo?
Out of curiosity, because I can't decide. I have a deadline of a month, an apartment for a month, and then we'll see. My employer is okay for me to leave early to visit places, and so it had to be settled. Everything had to be settled. So I kept looking and looking, informing myself about house sharing, the different nationalities that were in Dublin. So I opened myself to the idea. Mm-hmm. And I told Ed the funny story. I just looked up house sharing Dublin. RooMigo came up in the results.
Good SEO, Ed.
So I stopped looking at Daft, which is visually not nice or anything. They're not user friendly. So I like the concept of RooMigo. I just decided I was in my bathroom at that time. It was 2 weeks before I left, or 3 weeks before I left for Ireland. And I just created my profile, as simple as that. Updated a nice photo, telling who I was, what I'm looking for. Checking all the boxes with the personality traits I felt related to.
Okay.
Fun, party.
It's like a dating app, isn't it?
It is. And at the time I was Tindering a lot, so yes, felt like a game actually. It made the whole process of the new thing so much easier. And I think it helped me relax. And so I did my profile, checked, okay, I wish to be contacted. Okay, I'm looking for houses. I started to look at places. And then, a nice story, my first housemate contacted me via the platform, presenting herself. We both said, okay, but let's go. Let's find another person. And I contacted another guy who seemed matching our requirements.
Right.
The amazing thing is I didn't have the same budget as them, but we just felt it was the good match. The three of us, they were already here. They met, and then it went very quickly. We FaceTime. We both agreed we were looking for the same things. I gave them my entire blind trust.
And was the location okay?
We said we agreed perfectly on the location because we were looking for the same area, environment, atmosphere, family friendly. With animation, but not a temple bar with lots of clubs.
Yeah.
And so, no, perfect match. My housemate loves yoga. There are lots of yoga studios in Ranelagh. It was a perfect plan for regarding offices locations.
Okay, so the three of you came together and went house hunting?
Yeah, we agreed. This is what we need. Our standards. I had budget. Maya, do you trust us with the visits and stuff? I do trust you. I had to deal with a family matter at that time, so I totally trusted them entirely.
Okay.
When they told me we found a perfect house in Ranelagh, perfect location, it looks so nice, it's 150 above your budget, are you ready to do it? I sent right away the deposits, and I don't know how. I sent to a foreign country, which I never had been to people, trusting people I never met IRL. 170 euros I had to borrow from my dad, and off we go. I arrived.
And can I ask, just, and I suppose that this is probably important by way of customer feedback and things like that. Did that trust come from the fact that you had met through a platform and you had that time getting to know each other?
The fact that there's a profile. I'm sorry, the people, when you know nothing about co-living, you stick to surface. You see what I mean? It's right as if you were swiping on Tinder. Really? No, you stick to surface. I don't like her face.
Yes.
It doesn't look nice. Blah blah
Yes.
blah. You try to be as bankable as possible.
You try to be as bankable as possible. I think we've just turned a whole new set of people off co-living tonight.
But there's also the fact that you see the personality traits and the character traits, and people have a bio.
Yeah, I was coming to that.
Yeah, so it's a little bit deeper.
Yeah, okay, so there's the surface. The description you make of yourself, are you able to look attractive and enough so I can want to meet you and go further within a little paragraph and introduction regarding you?
Yeah.
This is a challenge. We all managed it. And then the tags. I paid really attention to the tags and traits of personality I was living or not.
And now, I mean, what, you're living together 6-7 months at this stage? 8 months?
I moved in 9 months and told quickly bye-bye to my fully paid furbished luxury apartment in order to move as quickly as possible.
And how is it working? How is it working out for you?
Living together is actually very natural. I'm
You're happy.
pretty surprised. They're very close to each other.
Good.
They're a little younger than me, so we don't have maybe the same relations or interests every time. But we've never lacked respect. We are totally honest to each other, and I feel like if I get mad at something bothers me, I can say it without being afraid.
Excellent.
And I'm very lucky.
Very good. So you would say that was a successful move.
My story is I'm not maybe the most common one. It's a super perfect story.
I think that's
that she found her
important.
housemates on RooMigo.
That's a strong.
And that's the
strong
only
vindication.
platform I used.
I think it's the only platform that exists in Ireland for that, but it's good. It's good to be the best when you're the only one too, Ed. So Brian, after our 60-minute exploration into co-living, are you convinced?
Oh wait, yes, I am. I mean, it's a new concept, isn't it? So I mean, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Well, look, thank you so much. That's all we've time for today. I think we could have spent so much longer on this topic, and I have a feeling it's one that we're going to return to several times over the next 12 months as more and more of these applications come in, and hopefully we will start to see that range that we need.
Well, I think it'd be a good idea because because, as I say, I think myself, to many listeners, this is completely new and it needs to be talked about.
Well, we can certainly do that. So, from Brian Fox and myself, Carol Talon, here on Property Matters, I'd like to thank our guests in studio with us tonight. Mayor, you're very welcome, and I hope that your time in Dublin remains all as positive as it has been so far. Ed Burke from RooMigo, thank you so much for joining us, and also Anil Khera from founder and CEO of Node. Apologies for the technical difficulties there, and thank you to Shane Flynn on sound and our producer Katie Talon. And we will see you all again next week.